Nasdaq and the S&P 500 headlining another historic day on Wall Street after the president's agreement with Mexico to overhaul NAFTA, creating their own trade agreement, sending stocks surging. And it's more great news for Wall Street, but how will it impact your wallet, especially if you're not in the market? Joining me now is the Director of Trade Initiative at the National Taxpayers Union, Bryan Riley. Bryan, thanks for coming on this morning. It was a bit surreal to watch that news conference yesterday from the Oval Office. He's on the phone with the president of Mexico, and it was such a gush fest. They both were just so in love with each other. How are both sides winning on a trade agreement? How are they both so happy about this, I guess, is my first question.
Well, it's really important to get this deal right, but clearly good trade agreements are agreements that benefit both countries. I think NAFTA has benefited the United States and Mexico and Canada, and just from the American standpoint, if you go to a grocery store today and look at all the fresh fruits and vegetables that you have from around the world, it'd be the middle of the winter, middle of the summer, and that's due not just to NAFTA, it's due to new technologies, but it's also due to the trade agreements that we have with countries around the world. So that's something that really benefits us, and whether it's trade agreements or Americans trading with other countries, those deals have got to be mutually beneficial, or they're just not going to work in the long run.
Yeah, so it appears we're not going to have many tariffs at all with Mexico, at least from this point forward. The market's, of course, responding. They love that. Everybody saw a little bit more money in the 401k yesterday. Let's talk about automobiles. That seemed to be one of the big parts of this agreement. It sounds like the president wants Mexican workers to get paid more, which should make, I guess, U.S. workers and labor unions here more competitive with them, because there's not this incentive for our auto parts to be made in Mexico, and also forces more of the auto parts to be made in the U.S. and Mexico together, which I guess would in some way cut China out of some of these deals and weaken them a bit. Is that right?
Right. Well, the challenge is with these trade agreements to reduce barriers and make it easier to do business in the United States. Since NAFTA took effect, for example, U.S. manufacturing output has gone up, U.S. automobile manufacturing output has gone up, and that's in part because of supply chains where we produce part of the cars in Canada, part in Mexico, part in the United States, and really the countries that prosper are the ones that can take advantage of getting the best parts, the best inputs from across the world, and we really need to move that direction in NAFTA. There's some concern that if we get too complicated and finicky with new regulations, so this much of a car's got to be made in the U.S. and it's got to have this much high-value labor, right, it can really get complicated and really make it harder to do business instead of easier. So that's one of those details that we really just need to take a close look at, and Congress needs to pay attention to.
And of course, we still have, NAFTA used to include Canada. Now it's been changed to the United States and Mexico trade agreement. Canada needs to get back into this thing. I'm sure they're a bit nervous right now. What do you think?
Well, Canada needs to get back in. They're going to look at it and see, is this an agreement that still benefits the United States? And Congress is going to have to weigh in as well and look at the details and say, is this something that benefits the United States? I think the real win is if we follow what I think President Reagan's vision was for NAFTA in 1979 when he first proposed it. And that is, if you're an American, it should be easier to do business with people in Canada and Mexico. It should be, essentially, if you're living in Nebraska, it's easy to do business with somebody in Mexico as it is with somebody in North Dakota. And we've been moving in that direction. The question is, are we going to continue to move in that direction of more economic freedom or not? And that's why this deal is so important and so encouraging. And you saw that reflected in the markets yesterday.
Absolutely. And this is just the beginning. We still got to do the EU. We still got to do China at some point down the road, and Korea and everywhere else. So there's a lot more work to happen. Thank you so much, sir.